Buenas noches, good evening, thanks very much for being here tonight. In a few weeks, we will all celebrate the 160th anniversary of José Martí, one of the most important individuals who were born in our island. And FIU leads in this magnificent celebration that will take place during the entire next year. It is very fitting that we do it, this first concert here at FIU for various reasons. The first is that music for Martí began in the state of Florida at the end of the 19th century. It was Cuban Americans living in Florida who first decided to put music to Martí's verses and who first honored Martí in music. It first happened in Tampa in 1891. Martí had finished a speech, and a cigar worker came up to Martí and said, "I would like to put music to one of your verses." His name was Benito O'Halloran's, and Martí was so moved that he immediately wrote verses that eventually became the music. The music got lost for many years, and about 50 years ago, in some reunion in Havana, some lady remembered, because it had been transmitted orally, this song, and a music professor, Hilario González, realized the importance of having discovered this piece that had been lost, transferred it to the music, and donated the copy to the National Museum of Music in Havana, where I found it, and we will share it tonight with you. The second song to Martí, also in Florida, was a few days later, on January 5th, 1892. Martí was in Key West, again, a big party for Martí, and a Cuban-American girl, a young girl, Maria Luisa Sanchez, sat at the piano and wrote a song for him. The song has been lost, but we can see that Martí and Florida are together from the very beginning. Thirdly, it was FIU who in 1995, celebrating the centennial of Martí, had a magnificent celebration. Uva de Aragón was one of the members who organized that, Repensando a Martí. And FIU had the vision of commissioning several musicians from Florida and elsewhere in the United States to compose new music for Martí. And one of those composers who came accepted that challenge was Professor Armando Tranquilino, who today will play one of the songs he wrote for that occasion in a new version, which is absolutely magnificent. And last but not least, FIU hosts the largest collection in the US of Cuban music and Cuban recordings, and many of the Martí music can be heard here at FIU. So it's, once again, I thank FIU for inviting me and for providing the Cuban community with so much Cuban material available for us for research. The authors, in my research, which has gone along for a little while here now, I discovered the amazing number of pieces reaching 706, of which 173 were inspired by Martí's work and life, and 533 set his texts to music, mostly the verses. 342 composers, including 100 foreign composers. Figures are so amazing that, that escape our understanding of this magnitude of work. We will have, in the first compilation, in the first part, we've divided the program. The first part will be music inspired by Martí and his work, and the second, music that has set Martí's famous works for music. And I'll again introduce the second act in a moment. In the first act, I want to highlight a few things. We have the work of two foreign composers. The first is Hubert de Blanc, a very famous composer of Dutch origin, who met his wife when his wife was in exile in New York, and that happy coincidence led him to live in Cuba and establish a great school of music. He wrote the Himno a Martí, published in Paris in 1905. And we will hear it, it's rarely heard, and we will have the pleasure of listening to it today. We have children's music, because Martí wrote many things for children, and also Martí was a very important musical presence in Cuban schools, and I've taken some music from that repertoire. We will have a piece by a Uruguayan composer with lyrics by a very important Uruguayan poet, Emilio Cueto. Written in 1946, its tonality is quite advanced for its time. And we will end with the first act with a Clave a Martí, which has a very interesting story. It's probably a song you will all recognize, because it says, "Aquí falta, señores, una voz." And then, of course, the voice that's missing is Martí. But that's not the way it started. The song was written a few years earlier, at the end of the 19th century, by an unknown musician called José Tereso Valdés, who was in love with a mulatto singer named Caridad. Caridad sang at the society in Santiago de Cuba called El Pilar, and she was so famous and good singer, she was called La Emperatriz del Pilar. And Caridad died, and José Tereso, honoring her memory, wrote, "Aquí falta, señores, una voz," and the voice missing was Caridad. And that's how the song started. In 1906, Emilio Valdés Villillo saw the opportunity in the music and lyrics, transformed the lyrics, sort of put aside the name of the true composer, so very few people really know how the song came about. And that's the one we know and we'll play today. But the song had a third sort of life. It was recycled again by one of the most famous musicians of Cuba, Antonio María Romeu, who specialized in writing danzón. And the danzón had a very peculiar function in Cuban music history. It served to introduce to the Cuban popular world music from operas and other music that was more classical oriented. So Cubans would get to hear Madame Butterfly and Rigoletto and all these arias thanks to the danzón, who then took the main melodic line and then transformed it. Well, the Clave a Martí was so popular that Romeu also decided to write a danzón on the clave that had become the signature piece of Villillo. Earlier this year, thanks to the initiative of the Instituto San Carlos in Cayo Hueso, I presented a slightly different version of this concert. And we had the pleasure of having a wonderful pianist from Puerto Rico, Professor José Ramos, who played the danzón. Most of you couldn't make it to Cayo Hueso, so in order to share the magic of that concert today, I have brought the DVD from that song, so you will also be able to hear the magnificent danzón by Romeu of the Clave a Martí. So when you get out of our concert tonight, you will be able to see the music in its entirety. The performers today will be Armando Tranquilino is the musical director and excellent arranger, Debbie Horta in the vocals, Luz Marina Salazar also vocals, Mike Horta at the piano, and Nikki Horta at the bass. The drums, it's a different person because the other person couldn't make it, and we have the wonderful drummer Orlando Machado. I also want to mention something that's close to our hearts. In the magnificent song of Willy Chirino, Ya Viene Llegando, Willy Chirino tells us, en la maleta traje un colibrí, un libro de Martí, un sueño y un danzón. All of us took from Cuba also Martí in our hearts, and the reason for this concert is to evoke the memory of this great man who presented an example of his life and his work. And I want to remind you also of a magnificent song of 1957 by the great composer Arsenio Rodríguez, who said, "Ámenla como Aguilera, cuídenla como Moncada, defiéndanla como Maceo y adórenla como Martí. And to end with the composer José Ramón Sánchez from Pinar del Río, who said, por eso yo soy cubano y me muero siendo cubano. Nadie me puede arrancar del suelo donde nací, pues no hay nada para mí como ver en un museo el machete de Maceo y la pluma de Martí. Thank you very much. And now we will have our great pianist, Mike Horta, who will interpret the magnificent Himno a Martí by Hubert de Blanc.